are you?
I'm 10 years.
10 years old.
Yes.
Do you know why Biafra is fighting?
Biafra is fighting for survival, sir.
Is it going to win?
Yes, sir.
His spirit, and that of this tattered army, driven by fear of genocide which may or may not lie ahead if they lose, plus what must be massive ineptitude on the part of the Nigerian army, is the most probable reason that this war of unequals now has gone into its third year.
Nigeria before the war had an army of just 6,000, and they were professionals, their officers trained by the British. They served with distinction as part of the UN force in the Congo. But then Biafra declared its secession, and all of the IGBO officers and men, some of the best, left to become the nucleus of Biafra's army. In just the past 2 years, Nigeria's army has exploded to 14 times its original size, to 85,000 men. Recruits who used to get 6 months of training now get a mere 6 weeks. They are volunteers, most of them illiterate, just out of the bush, with little sense of nationhood. Their leaders tell them that they are fighting for one Nigeria, but that does not, it cannot have the same urgency for them that mere survival has for the Biafran. A Nigerian soldier may volunteer because he needs a job, or because army life appeals to him as the good life. Besides his uniform and the prestige that goes with it, he gets a comfortable ration of beer and cigarettes. And the pay, at $40 a month, is not bad. His leaders are not aggressive. Most military observers credit what success the Nigerian army has had so far chiefly to their lopsided superiority in firepower furnished by the British and the Russians. It is said only half in jest. The Nigerian army has so much firepower that they use ammunition as a defoliant. Nigeria's planes, MiG-17s and Ilyushin bombers, were bought for cash from the Russians who want to get a political foothold here. Most of the planes are flown by Egyptians, who are characterized as wary of anti-aircraft fire, therefore less than enthusiastic about going after military targets. That, it is suggested, is one cause of the high civilian casualties in the air raids on Biafra. But the war has been bloody on both sides, and inept and unaggressive though they may be, the Nigerian army in 2 years of sporadic fighting has suffered heavily. They will not release official casualty figures, but an army doctor told me that 8,000 Nigerian soldiers have died, and perhaps another 25,000 have been wounded. The military has just 11 army doctors for its 85,000 men. A severe head or body wound in the field means almost certain death. The Nigerian army gives no medals in this civil war. I asked the commander-in-chief, head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, why?
I will hate tomorrow, when the war is over, and we sit around the table with an IGBO officer, and he asks, what is that medal? And I say, it is the Okiwe medal, it is the Umahi medal, it is Onitsha medal, it is Enugu medal, it is Port Harcourt medal, and that this is the war for, the war against, the IGBOS. They said we hate to sort of have that sort of feeling, because it will make the child feel as though, he's a conquered sort of person.
The war, says Gowon over and over, is not to conquer the IGBO. It is to bring the IGBO back into one Nigeria.
One of the two reasons, along with increased military effectiveness, that Biafra is still alive is the fact that not nearly so many people are starving as were last fall. And the reason for that is the emergency airlift sponsored by Catholic and Protestant churches and the International Red Cross. At feeding centers like this, 3 million people, a third of Biafra's population, is fed 1 meal a day, 6 days a week. At best, it is a subsistence feeding, just enough to prevent starvation. A ball of cornmeal laced with powdered milk. Perhaps some vegetables, a small piece of fish, and some soup. all handed out early in the morning to millions of people who would have died were this food not flown in nightly to several Biafran airstrips carved from the jungle. While the relief flights have reduced dramatically the number of children and adults starving to death, down perhaps to 600 a week from the high of several thousand a week last year, the dying continues. In clinics like this all over Biafra, youngsters in the final stages of severe malnutrition still die, as did several of these during our week in Biafra. Not enough food is being flown in, not enough grown, and for many, what there is now just too late. This bush clinic is run by Father Kevin Downey. After 14 years in Africa, he and fellow missionaries were ordered to leave Biafra in 1967 by the Irish ambassador. They stayed, as did Protestants of other nationalities, and they, in the main, have been responsible for keeping Biafra from starving to death. How hard has the war been on the IGBO civilian population? How many people have died, would you think, Father?
I would think that we've gone into the 2nd million. I am not a statistician, and it's very hard to talk about millions, but I think that it's, according to the experts here, I think that they've gone into the 2nd million. And they have suffered incredibly. And this is the one big argument that I would put forward as one of the reasons why they want to survive on their own and they want to live on their own. They could not have suffered so long and so much without having a purpose.
To augment the relief airlift, Biafra has formed a 2nd army to work the land. It is planting wherever it can. Here in virgin territory, where no crop ever grew before, young men employed by relief agencies and the government are breaking ground to plant corn, rice, yams, melons, anything else that might grow. And this, like everything else here, is conducted with spirit, emotion, and beauty. It's clear that as long as this war goes on, the starvation will too. Any break in the relief airlift, I was told, any crop failure in the next few weeks, and graveyards like these that dot Biafra and contain the bodies of the young and innocently dead will multiply.
There is a bitter irony in this billboard which is seen all across Nigeria. For Nigerian babies have not been healthy babies. Even before the war, disease and malnutrition regularly killed 1 out of 3 children there. And Nigeria's leaders ask, where was the world's solicitude, where was the church's succor before Biafra? General Gowon, a Christian, is sensitive to the charges of mass starvation.
I have got nothing to hide. My conscience is clear. I've got moral standard. God knows that we have no intention whatsoever to starve any Biafran children or to commit genocide against anybody. This war was forced on us, and it has got to be fought for the sake of the country, for the sake of the millions of people in this country.
But those millions of Nigerians are not thinking mostly of the war. Their chief preoccupation is commerce. And war or not, business booms. The Lagos docks are choked with ships from around the world bringing goods for the huge consumer market here and taking away for sale overseas Nigeria's palm oil and peanuts, its animal hides and cocoa, and its tin. But the real prize in Nigeria, the overriding reason the major powers focus on this country's conflict, is Nigerian oil. Already, they are the 12th largest producer in the world. Conceivably, they will eventually become 5th or 6th. The British produce most of it, a United States company, Gulf, the rest. It is Nigerian oil, much of it under territory that Biafra claims, that is said to trigger France's last-ditch aid to Biafra. It is oil that Nigeria is counting on to finance the reconstruction when the war is done. At the time of Nigeria's independence from Great Britain 9 years ago, oil profits netted about $7 million annually to the federal government. This year, in spite of the war, the Nigerian government will collect almost $300 million in revenue.
Biafrans admit it is an oil war, at least in part. They know their country sits above what may be the richest oil reservoir in the world. And it is the oil, plus the ingenuity of the IGBO, that has kept Biafra running. In refineries, backyard stills like this, small, crude, hidden away in the bush, Biafra produces gasoline, kerosene, diesel fuel in surprising amounts. There are 50 to 100 of these refineries all over Biafra, and they now produce enough fuel to keep the army, the church relief operation, the government, and the civilian population on necessary wheels. There is traffic on the roads, and on occasion it is heavy, which surprised me. Troops and food moving. No shortage of transport of any kind. And that is part of the staggering normalcy with which life in Biafra goes on. In spite of 2 years of war, in spite of the loss of all its major cities, in spite of the death of more than 1 million people in 24 months, life in Biafra goes on. Markets like this one at Orlu, where 40 died last year, were bombed and strafed by Nigerian jets. But the markets were moved back into the bush, and daily commerce goes on. Food is still on sale, but in smaller quantities than in pre-war days. Basic services are still being sold for Biafran pounds. Wartime inflation has forced prices up. Clothing costs have tripled. Cigarettes sell for $20 a pack. Inflation aside, life in Biafra is so normal that even the judicial system has not faltered. Back in the bush, a civil trial to settle a land dispute. Hardly the thing we thought we'd find in a supposedly defeated country about to be overrun. And in areas just recaptured as the Biafran army pushes south again, in cities like Owerri, where damage was heavy, after obviously heavy fighting, the business of cleaning up and putting things right started almost as soon as the area was secure. Owerri, after being in Nigerian hands for 7 months, is expected to be a fully functioning city in a matter of weeks, making room for refugees who already are starting to return, and for whom the first Mass of Thanksgiving in the unfinished and war-damaged cathedral was an event of paramount importance.
They had to suffer first of all from the air with the bombing and the strafing that left so many of our civilians dead. They had to fight at the front where so many of our young men have died. We have become, most of us, refugees. We have lost our property. We have nothing of our own. That suffering we have known for the past 20 months. That suffering we still have. But we live in hope that that Holy Spirit will come down on us, that he will enlighten the minds of our leaders, and that they will lead us to a true and just and lasting peace.
In the territory the Biafrans evacuated as they fled before the federal troops, the abandoned buildings echo only to the wind. And the cities in the Igbo heartland, once the most densely populated area in all of Africa, have been emptied of their people. Emptied by the Igbo's fear of the federal Nigerian. No matter the federal government's assurances that they will be safe, the Igbos flee. They have gone into the bush, leaving their homes shattered by shell fire, their schools barren of students, their government headquarters in the once flourishing administrative capital of Enugu ghostly quiet. Nothing is left here now but a few scattered refugee camps and the federal troops who garrison the eerie and deserted miles of road and bush.